Okay, Xi'an's History of Rock, Part 12, Punk. Firstly, just to make an important point, common knowledge, Wikipedia, most people do not differentiate between punk music and punk rock music. Punk bands play punk rock music, makes sense, but musicians and punk fans and those in the know, we do make a clear and important distinction between the two. So firstly, timing. Punk rock music started with the Kinks and the Who and then Stooges, and spans from the 60s through the 70s, 80s until now. And punk music, true original punk music, is just from the second half of the 70s, really. So it's a subgenre. Punk is a subgenre of punk rock music. Nirvana would have considered themselves a punk rock band. They would never have considered themselves a punk band. So musically, it's different because it's thinner. They probably used less mics, less production, and it's faster. So, do that, 1, 2, 3, 4, do that, that's punk music, basically. That's in its truest sense. Obviously, there are a lot of deviations and variations. Typically, they didn't put much effort into production or anything really. They weren't musicians. They weren't musos. They didn't define themselves typically as musicians. None of these metal and prog rock, Keith Moon drum solos. None of that. It was back to basics. Any plum could pick up a guitar and just play their heart out. It was true people's music for the people. That's how it felt, I think, in London particularly. In the US, it was a little different. I think the musicianship is generally better in the US throughout rock. In many examples, just a level higher in musical proficiency. Although obviously there are exceptions and there are many incredible British musicians. I just think that in the US it was more of a priority, and so what else defines punk? Well, attitude. So we don't give a fuck was big. It was a big thing. We don't care what you think, or we think you're shit. One of those two. Again, maybe that was maybe a bit stronger in London, but it was definitely like a political scene. As an attitude. So lots of subversive lyrics and political stances. The Clash got politically involved. A lot of punk bands, as Dead Kennedys. It was maybe the scene that was most anti-establishment of any musical scene. In fact, the vast majority of musical scenes are establishment through and through. They are capitalist dreams. They work with the system, for the system. But punk kind of at least attempted to kind of break out of that. So the thinner, faster, shouting. Lots of them couldn't really sing. Maybe didn't want to. Particularly, not much technical skill. And the attitude, either not giving a shit or really trying to change, kind of with kind of anger. There's an anger and aggression in lots of punk music. So when did it start? Well, I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly, as I'm sure neither do you. But commercially speaking, the first punk music, typical classic punk music record was the first Ramones album, self-titled. They were from New York. Now, being a US band and having a good, team behind them, the idea was to make money, was to sell records, and the production was good. They did put money and time into production. It would have been. The music's still there. Still 1, 2, 3, 4. It's still classic punk music. But yeah, there was some time and money put into the production. It's good production. Strong, powerful drums, and yeah. So bit of an exception from London punk, I would say. And then the following year, that was 76. Then the following year, a swathe of London bands who really defined the genre, and 77 debuted the Damned, the Stranglers, the Clash, the Sex Pistols, the Vibrators. It exploded. So 76, you might have got like a few little sparks, but then 77, it exploded commercially. Another thing to mention is that many famous punk artists didn't produce punk music, but they were just labelled as punk artists because of who they hung around with, or because they had subversive lyrics or subversive ideas, or because of the way they dressed, the kind of ripped clothes and studs and safety pins, maybe like spiky hair or bleached hair, but maybe their music was not punk. That this did occasionally happen. Lots of critics and journalists consider Patti Smith punk music. It's surprising. She sounds like Kate Bush to me, or Nico. It's like almost couldn't be further from punk music, but was called a punk artist, part of the East Coast US punk scene, because of her attitude and her political movements. The Runaways, another good example. Ian Dury and the Blockheads would have been totally surrounded by London punk bands that sounded much more like London punk. What else? I suppose the West Coast punk scene should be mentioned. It was almost simultaneous. The Dead Kennedys, who I mentioned, from San Francisco, so West Coast of the US, United States, California, Washington, Oregon, and Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Dead Milkmen. And they created a sound that kind of got encapsulated and continued, whereas I feel the London punk scene kind of came and went in just a few years. I think that the West Coast scene just continued. And it was quite light. They took the light side of punk, although some of the lyrics and chords were sometimes darker or more aggressive. They had a kind of light side as well. And there's some great West Coast punk pop songs, some beautiful melodies. Screeching Weasels comes to mind, and then later Green Day in the 90s, and then Blink-182, all West Coast punk style bands. And then finally, the hardcore punk scene is important to mention. It's basically just, so not particularly light, and they also didn't have like the kind of instead of like do-da, 1, 2, 3, it was more like do-da, just screaming and noise, and how far can we push this? Really intensification of punk. That scene was broken by the Bad Brains, the godfathers of hardcore punk, although they deny this. From Washington DC, so that was East Coast US, and then Fugazi soon afterwards. But these were great musicians, The Bad Brains had jazz songs; they could play all types. This wasn't a typical London style punk band who started. The Sex Pistols could, only just about put a 4/4 beat together. At the same time, this was a different style. They could do a lot, and you can hear in Bad Brains and Fugazi and lots of more US punk bands, they varied more, and you could really see that they were great musicians. They valued their profession from the get-go. And then the Bad Brains, as I mentioned before, demonstrated this perfectly by kind of absorbing what was happening around them from different perspectives in the 80s, and then became like a funk metal band. Yeah, that's it.